Hello everyone, and welcome to a new season of Insight. In celebration of our 75th season, we've decided to give ourselves a facelift and move out of the studio into the place where all the action takes place, our very own beautiful Jacoby Symphony Hall, for an inside look at what makes the Jacksonville Symphony tick. We start our new season with the world premiere of a celebratory work by the American composer Brittany J. Brittany is a brilliant composer in her 30s, based in North Carolina. Her music has been played by ensembles across the country, and we're delighted to be giving the very first performances of this new piece entitled Testify, co-commissioned by the Jacksonville Symphony and the Virginia B. Toulmin Foundation. Brittany grew up in the church, and she has described some of her earliest memories as coming from the sense of joy and togetherness that singing and playing instruments together brought her. Her mother plays the tambourine, with the composer describing her kaleidoscopic rhythms as a whirlwind of sound and color. Testify is built on some of these rhythms. The piece begins with a thrilling piano and clarinet solo, like a fanfare announcing what's about to happen. It then gets faster, built on a repeated rhythm, bum bum ba bum bum, that drives the music forward. Brittany builds in fragments of the Black hymn, I'm So Glad Jesus Lifted Me, giving this short 5-minute piece a sense of irrepressible joy and expectation. A wonderful way to begin our 75th season. Next, we travel back in time 121 years, and from America to Russia. In the last years of the 19th century, a young Russian named Sergei Rachmaninov had emerged as one of the day's greatest pianists. His rise as a composer, however, took a little longer. In 1897, the premiere of his first symphony had been a disaster. Some placed the blame at the feet of the conductor, the composer Alexander Glazunov, who'd been drunk. But most criticized Rachmaninoff for his insipid melodies and grey orchestration. Ironic indeed, since he would relatively later become world famous for his unforgettable melodic genius and gloriously colourful use of the orchestra. But after the premiere of the First Symphony in 1897, Rachmaninoff was plunged into depression, eventually seeking out the newly invented forms of hypnotherapy and psychological analysis to help make his way through. In his next work, the Second Piano Concerto, Rachmaninoff dispelled his demons and began his steady rise to world fame, with a work that remains constantly performed and deeply loved to this day. Rachmaninoff grew up on his family estate in rural Russia, surrounded by the sound of bells at the nearby Orthodox church. Later in life, he described how these bells captured his youthful imagination, remaining a lifelong obsession. And although he would later specifically capture their sound in his symphonic masterpiece, The Bells, the first time we sense their importance is at the opening of the Second Piano Concerto. Unusually beginning with the piano soloist without orchestra, the piano strikes 8 bell-like chords, each one more intense, immediately drawing us into Rachmaninoff's very atmospheric and Russian sound world. The orchestra enters with a dark and soulful melody, and we're off. Although a second, more lyrical theme later emerges, the movement draws to a climax with a majestic, or maestoso, as we say in music, version of the bell chords for piano and full orchestra. The second movement is a lyrical contrast, slow and pastoral in character. After an uneasy-sounding chromatic opening, the mood lifts to something more relaxed, with beautiful flute and clarinet solos. The famous finale is made up of 2 themes. First, a march full of anticipation and excitement. Fragments from the first movement, especially the bell motive, and the pastoral theme from the second, return, alternating with the gloriously sumptuous and expressive second theme. After the march and the themes from the previous movements have alternated a few times, the glorious, expressive melody returns triumphant in an enormous, exciting and passionate peroration in which the piano thunders out majestic chords against the melody sweeping along in the full orchestra. There features a wild coda, a race to the finish between orchestra and soloist, bringing this thrilling work to a dramatic close. Rachmaninoff, the composer, had arrived. At exactly the same time as Rachmaninoff was in therapy, Richard Strauss, only a few years older, was already enjoying a growing reputation as one of the greatest composers and conductors of his generation. He had already established himself as the enfant terrible of German music in a series of tone poems for orchestra. He championed programmatic music, that is, music that tells a story rather than simply having an abstract meaning, as we'd expect, for example, in a Mozart symphony. Instead, he turned to Beethoven for inspiration and his third symphony, the Eroica, which is Beethoven's first symphony to have a title. Eroica means heroic, and Strauss goes one step further than simply giving his music a title by giving the whole work a story. The result was Ein Heldenleben, or A Hero's Life, one of Strauss's most popular and brilliant tone poems. Strauss based this hero's life on his own life. At the time, he was only 34 years old, leading critics to describe the work as a monstrous act of egoism, with one reviewer describing the music as revolting a picture of this revolting man as one might ever encounter. Strauss relished such criticisms like a badge of honor. The piece divides into 6 sections. The first is a portrait of the hero himself, full of hubris and optimism, with a famously acrobatic melody starting in the lower strings and horns. This is music of incredible joy and affirmation. It always gives me goosebumps. Next comes a portrait of the hero's adversaries, in Strauss's case, the music critics. The music is biting and chattering in the woodwinds, with sarcastic, chromatically moving chords in the lower brass, making the music sound very whiny. Next is a portrait of the hero's companion, in this case Strauss's wife, Pauline, which takes the musical form of a famous section for solo violin and orchestra. Infamously difficult, the concertmaster paints a musical picture of Mr. and Mrs. Strauss squabbling furiously before making up in a glorious love duet. Next comes a picture of the hero at war, with the whole orchestra involved in the heat of battle. For the 5th section, the hero's works of peace, Strauss includes quotes from a whole range of his own music, once again unafraid of self-promotion. In the final section, the hero, exhausted from life, but triumphant, gradually retreats, accompanied by themes representing his wife, and the work ends with a note of quiet satisfaction and profundity. There are few works in the repertoire that stretch an orchestra while simultaneously producing such a thrilling and memorable musical effect. I have to confess that conducting Ein Heldenleben is one of my favorite musical experiences, and I know hearing it will thrill and inspire you too. We can't wait to see you back in Jacobi Symphony Hall for the start of our 75th season.